Sit with the kids, my brother ordered when I attended his wedding party. When I refused, my mom shouted, "You offer nothing to all of us. You are such a disgrace." My wife looked on smiling. When the guest of honor walked in and called me boss, everyone was shocked. What happened next was unbelievable. I will tell you how everything unfolded. Let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Sam Arwell from Miami. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I almost didn't go to the wedding. The invitation came in the mail, a plain white envelope with my name misspelled, again. No return address, no warm note, just a stiff card announcing that my younger brother, Daniel, was finally tying the knot with Marissa. The whole thing felt like an obligation more than an invitation. I stared at it for a long time before dropping it on the kitchen counter next to the pile of mail I never opened. My wife, Ava, noticed it that evening. She picked it up, flipped it over, and said, "They spelled your name wrong." Again, I gave her a half-hearted smile. At least they remembered me this time. It wasn't bitterness exactly. It was more like a dull ache, like the pain of an old wound that flares up when the weather shifts. I'd grown used to being overlooked by my own family. I was the eldest, quiet, bookish, always doing the right thing, but never loud enough to be remembered. Daniel was the golden boy, the one who could crash a car and get praised for living with passion. I could pay off someone's mortgage, and they'd ask why I didn't do it sooner. Growing up, I learned to shrink myself, to sit at the edge of photos, to give more than I got. I figured if I worked hard enough, kept my head down, and didn't cause trouble, they'd notice me eventually. They didn't. They saw what they wanted to see, a boring, dutiful son who offered little and expected even less. I went to college out of state. When I graduated top of my class, no one came. When I bought my first condo, they asked why I didn't just rent like Daniel. When I got married, half of them didn't show up. And yet, somehow, I was still surprised when they kept treating me like an afterthought. So when the wedding came around, I almost didn't go. But Ava, wise, composed, never one to raise her voice, looked at me that morning and said, "Go. Not for them, for you. So they can't say you never showed up." She didn't have to add what we were both thinking. That no matter how much I tried to stay away, I still cared. Some part of me, deep and aching, still hoped for a moment of recognition. Maybe it would come in the form of a kind word from my mother, or a nod of respect from my brother. Maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see me. We arrived at the estate, the one I secretly owned, though none of them knew that. I had bought it a few years back through a trust, more for its historical value than anything else. It had belonged to a friend of mine who passed away, and I preserved it because I knew how much he loved it. I leased it out for events, weddings mostly, but never put my name on the placard. I didn't need the attention. The parking lot was full, and I saw familiar cars, my mother's beat-up silver sedan, Daniel's new BMW, and Aunt Lisa's gaudy SUV with the "God is Love" bumper sticker. As we stepped out of our car, Ava looped her arm through mine. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. "Let's just get through this." Inside, the reception hall was already buzzing. People were milling about, drinks in hand, laughter rising in bursts. We walked in, heads turning briefly before returning to whatever gossip was hotter than our entrance. I spotted Daniel across the room, surrounded by his friends, all in matching tuxedos. He glanced at me once, barely acknowledging me with a head nod before returning to his story. It didn't take long before the first slight came. We were about to sit when Daniel walked over, his face flushed with liquor and pride. He didn't hug me, didn't even shake my hand, just pointed vaguely across the hall and said, "Hey, yeah, can you sit with the kids' table?" We kinda ran out of seats at the front. I blinked, confused. "The kids' table?" "Yeah," he said with a lazy shrug. "You didn't RSVP, so yeah, just for now." Ava looked at me, her jaw tightening, but she didn't say a word. I straightened my spine. "No, I'll stand," I said quietly. Daniel raised an eyebrow, then gave an exaggerated shrug and walked off. That was when my mother swooped in. She was wearing a peach-colored dress that strained at the seams, her perfume cloying and familiar. Her eyes flashed when she got close. "What's your problem now?" she hissed. "He told me to sit with the children," I replied evenly. "Well, you didn't RSVP. You can't expect people to bend over backwards for you. You offer nothing to all of us. You are such a disgrace." Ava stepped forward, but I stopped her with a glance. I could handle this. I swallowed hard. Not because her words were new, they weren't, but because no matter how many times she said it, they still hit like a punch. A disgrace. That was her favorite label for me. Not absent, not distant, not hard to reach. Just a disgrace. Like I'd failed them by becoming something they couldn't understand. What she didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that while they ignored me, I had built something. Something quiet and solid and mine. And today, that truth was going to come out, whether they were ready or not. The guest of honor was due to arrive any minute. And when he did, everything would change. I stood there in the middle of the reception hall, the word disgrace still ringing in my ears like a church bell struck too hard. I wasn't angry, at least not in the way they expected me to be. I wasn't about to cause a scene. I'd grown up swallowing my fury like medicine, bitter going down, but numbing once it settled. Instead, I felt something colder, something distant, as if I were watching this whole thing from outside my own body. Ava slipped her hand into mine. Her grip was steady, strong. She didn't have to say anything, she never did. She knew who I was beneath the layers of dismissal they'd piled on me all these years. She saw me. That had always been enough. But today something in me stirred. A part of me that had long accepted the background role was suddenly curious to know what it might feel like to step into the light, just once. Not to flaunt, not to show off, just to be seen. The DJ announced the arrival of the guest of honor, and the room shifted. Phones were drawn, heads turned toward the grand entrance. The air took on a different kind of weight, the excited, expectant hush people reserve for someone who matters. I already knew who it was. I had arranged it myself, quietly, through a phone call a few weeks ago. He owed me a favor, a big one. Then the doors opened. Mr. Omar Bennett walked in wearing a tailored navy suit, his presence like a ripple in water. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with the kind of confidence that wasn't loud but impossible to ignore. Everyone in the room knew who he was. Real estate mogul, philanthropist, a man who'd been on the cover of magazines and at the helm of billion-dollar deals. They didn't know what tied him to this event, why he was here of all places, but they knew enough to act impressed. My brother Daniel practically sprinted toward him, extending a hand with that fake humility he'd perfected. "Mr. Bennett, wow, I didn't expect." But Omar walked right past him, straight toward me. "Boss," he said with a warm smile, extending his hand. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder." I took his hand, shook it firmly. "Glad you made it." Gasps. Literal gasps. Someone dropped a fork. I didn't turn around to see who. I didn't need to. Omar clapped me on the back and added, "Didn't realize this was your family. You should have told me. I would have come in quieter." I smiled. "You know me." Never did like a big entrance. A hush settled over the room like a weighted blanket. People were no longer pretending not to notice me. Now they were staring, mouths slightly open, faces tight with confusion and dawning realization. My mother, still frozen near the side table, had gone pale. Daniel looked like he'd swallowed a rock. Even Aunt Lisa, who had never passed up a moment to whisper something sideways, was completely speechless. Then I saw Ava smile, not out of spite, but satisfaction. She didn't care about the applause, the attention, or the whispers. She cared that the truth was finally undeniable. That I didn't have to prove myself anymore. I just had to exist as I was. "Wait," someone said. "My cousin Terrence, I think. You own this estate?" I finally turned around. "Yes," I said. "I bought it 3 years ago." Didn't seem worth mentioning. That was when the apologies started. My mother approached first, her voice softer now. I didn't know, sweetheart." "No," I said. "You didn't care to know." Daniel tried next. "Look, man, I didn't mean any disrespect. I just thought, you thought exactly what you said. That I offer nothing. That I'm a disgrace." "I didn't mean it like that," he said, almost childlike now. We weren't expecting this. You weren't expecting me to matter. I said, voice calm. That's the part that hurts. There it was. The truth I'd buried for years. Unspoken, but sharp-edged. I never wanted to be king. I just didn't want to be invisible. But the moment I stepped outside the roles they cast for me, silent son, backup plan, emotional scapegoat, I became a threat. And now that I had power, now that others acknowledged it, they wanted to rewrite history. I wasn't interested in revisions. The rest of the night unfolded like a slow-motion crash. People kept coming up to me, offering belated congratulations, shaky laughter, awkward compliments. I smiled politely but didn't give much back. I'd spent my whole life giving my time, my silence, my dignity, and I was done bartering for scraps of decency. As the night wound down, I stood near the balcony, watching the lights shimmer across the estate I owned. Ava joined me, slipping her arms around my waist. "You didn't have to come," she said quietly. "I know," I said, "but I'm glad I did." "Why?" "Because they needed to see what I've always known." She kissed my cheek. "And what's that?" "That I don't need a seat at their table. I built my own." The morning after the wedding, the sun filtered through our bedroom window, casting long stripes across the hardwood floor. Ava was still asleep beside me, her breath steady, one arm draped across her stomach. I watched her for a while, grateful, not just for her presence, but for her patience. Loving someone like me, someone who spent most of his life stitched together with silence, was no easy task. I got out of bed and made coffee, each motion deliberate, methodical. My phone was already lighting up with messages. Missed calls, texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. A few voicemails I didn't bother listening to. The sudden surge of attention didn't flatter me. It felt invasive, undeserved, like they were reaching out not because they cared about me, but because they finally realized I had something they wanted to be close to. I didn't know them anything, but for my own clarity, I found myself thinking back, unraveling the thread of how I got here. The journey hadn't been glamorous. It had been long, lonely, and lined with doubt. After college, I took a job at a small logistics firm. I was a project analyst, buried behind spreadsheets, working under people who had half my discipline and double the ego. I kept my head down, said yes to everything, and worked through weekends while my peers partied. No one noticed, of course, not even my family. I sent out a few updates early on, told them when I got promoted, when I got a raise. The replies were always short. Nice. Good for you. Sometimes nothing at all. I stopped sharing after a while. But I didn't stop building. 5 years in, I left the firm and started my own logistics company out of a one-bedroom apartment. I borrowed money from a mentor, sold my car, and ate instant noodles for months. Ava was the only one who believed in the idea. She handled client calls while working 2 jobs herself. We were exhausted, anxious, sometimes too broke to fix a flat tire, but we held each other up. There were nights I cried quietly in the bathroom so she wouldn't hear. Nights I asked myself if I was chasing a dream or just avoiding my family's dismissal by trying to prove them wrong. That company eventually took off. Slowly at first, then faster. One big contract led to another. I made smart hires, bought out smaller firms, expanded into warehousing and distribution. By the time I turned 35, I was a multimillionaire on paper. The estate, the one from the wedding, was something I bought because it felt like a symbol, not of wealth, but of perseverance. It had once been the centerpiece of a wealthy industrialist legacy. When it came up for sale after years of neglect, I bought it quietly, out of a trust, and restored it piece by piece. I hired local contractors, paid everyone above market, and never told anyone in the family. Why? Because it wasn't for them. It was for the version of me they never bothered to ask about. I thought that by keeping it hidden, I was preserving my peace. I told myself I didn't need their validation. And maybe I didn't. But deep down, a part of me still waited for the moment they'd see me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. That moment never came. Not until the night Omar Bennett walked into the room and called me boss. Now, suddenly, they all wanted to talk. Daniel texted me. "Let's grab a drink soon. Just us. Like old times." There were no old times. Just moments he spoke and I was expected to listen. Mom left a voicemail. I didn't mean what I said, honey. I was just stressed. Please don't hold it against me. But I did hold it. I had held it for years, in my stomach, in my chest, in the back of my throat every time I visited and felt like a stranger in my own bloodline. They didn't know what it felt like to be the son who always had to explain himself, who had to shrink his victories into digestible sound bites so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. They didn't know because they never asked. I opened my phone and began typing a message. Not to respond, just to write. You only see me now because someone else saw me first. But I've been here all along. Then I deleted it. They didn't deserve that truth handed to them so easily. Some truths, I realized, are not meant to be shared. They're meant to be lived. And let others stumble upon them too late. Later that afternoon, Ava came downstairs and sat beside me on the couch. Any new fan mail? She asked, eyes playful. Just the usual. People pretending they always believed in me. She rested her head on my shoulder. They'll keep coming. I know. So what are you going to do? I sipped my coffee, watching the birds flit outside our window. Nothing, I said. Let them sit with their silence for once. She smiled. You're allowed to be angry, you know. I'm not angry, I said softly. I'm just done explaining myself. And for the first time, I meant it. They didn't waste time. Within 48 hours, the phone calls turned into doorstep visits. It started with Aunt Lisa. She showed up around noon on a Wednesday, standing at my gate like a penitent parishioner outside a chapel. I watched her from the upstairs window, arms folded, her body shifting from foot to foot as if she were reconsidering this entire charade. I didn't go down. Ava did. I heard murmurs of small talk, apologies couched in excuses. Your mother was just overwhelmed. Daniel had so much on his plate. You know how families are. I hated that phrase. You know how families are. It's what people say when they want you to ignore your pain for the sake of preserving someone else's comfort. Ava came back up 10 minutes later, holding a small tin of cookies. Peace offering, she said, rolling her eyes. I'm not at war. No, but they think you are. By Friday, my mother called again. This time I answered. She didn't say hello. Just launched into a story about how hard things had been lately, how the house was falling apart, how Daniel had been under stress planning the wedding, how she hadn't meant what she said at the reception. Then why did you say it? I asked flatly. A pause. Then a sigh. I was upset. You showed up late, and then you acted like you were better than everyone. I was told to sit with the children, Mom. You should have RSVP'd. I didn't think I needed to, I said. I didn't think my presence would even register. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is spending your entire life trying to prove your worth to people who decided long ago not to see it. She got quiet. I could hear her breathing shift, the telltale sign of tears she wanted me to feel guilty for. I didn't raise you to be cruel, she whispered. I laughed, a bitter sound I hadn't meant to let out. You didn't raise me at all, Mom. You maintained me. There's a difference. Click. That was her way. When the conversation didn't go how she wanted, she pulled the plug. Left you with the silence and the guilt, hoping you'd come crawling back to fix it. But I didn't call again. I didn't text. I just sat with the truth, uncomfortable as it was, and let it settle around me like a storm finally passed. That weekend, Daniel showed up. Ava was out grocery shopping, and I was on the back patio, trimming hedges just for the sake of doing something with my hands. He parked his car right at the front of the gate and buzzed in like we were old friends catching up for brunch. I let him in. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to hear what kind of spin he'd try to put on it. He walked up, hands in his pockets, not quite meeting my eyes. Nice place, he said. Didn't realize you were doing this well. Clearly. He shifted. Look, I just wanted to say. I didn't mean to come off like a jerk at the wedding. You didn't come off like one, I said. You were one. He blinked, probably not used to being spoken to so plainly. I was just stressed. You know how weddings are. Things got scrambled, and I'm not here for a list of excuses, Daniel. He exhaled sharply. Okay. Fine. I messed up. We all did. But you gotta admit, man, you didn't make it easy on any of us. You just disappeared. You don't show up to birthdays. You don't call. Because every time I did, I left feeling smaller than when I arrived. He went quiet for a moment. Then he said something that almost sounded honest. We didn't know you were this successful. Maybe if we had. I held up my hand. There it is. That's the truth, isn't it? You didn't see me because you didn't think I had anything worth seeing. Now that you know who I am, what I have, you're here. You want me at the table. But not because you love me. Because I finally look valuable. That's not true, he said quickly. It's exactly true. I walked past him, toward the gate. You need to go, I said, opening it for him. This house is not a revolving door. I don't reward people for treating me like a footnote. He stared at me, speechless. As he walked back to his car, he turned once and said, You're really gonna just cut us off? After everything? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He drove off, and I closed the gate behind him. That night, Ava and I sat on the patio, drinking wine under the soft glow of the garden lights. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. I didn't think it'd feel this quiet after the fallout. But it's a good quiet, right? I nodded. It's the sound of boundaries. She raised her glass. To keeping them. I tapped my glass against hers and whispered, to finally choosing peace over permission. The final straw wasn't loud. It didn't come with screaming or threats or some dramatic act of betrayal. It was a voicemail. Just my mother's voice, soft and wounded, saying, I guess you've made up your mind. I just hope you remember who was there when you had nothing. I listened to it twice. Not because I didn't understand, but because I needed to hear how far she would go to twist the narrative. I was never without. I worked. I sacrificed. I built something from dust. And yet here she was, trying to rewrite it as if my survival was a group effort, like she had sat beside me through those years of isolation and self-doubt. She hadn't. She couldn't even name the company I owned. I knew then that there would be no real reckoning, no genuine apology, just a carousel of guilt and deflection. And I was tired of spinning in circles, hoping one day the ride would take me somewhere new. So I asked her to meet me. One last time. We chose a neutral spot, a quiet little cafe downtown. I arrived early, ordered coffee, and took the seat by the window. When she walked in, she looked older than I remembered, not just in her face, but in her posture. Like the weight of her pride was finally starting to drag her down. She sat across from me without a word. I'm not here to fight, I said calmly. I'm here to close the chapter. She blinked slowly. That's dramatic. No, I said. What's dramatic is pretending this family dynamic isn't broken beyond repair. She sighed, shaking her head. You've always been too sensitive. No, I said, leaning in slightly. I've always been too silent. And that ends today. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list grievances like a prosecution. I just spoke, clearly, fully, like I was finally giving myself permission to be heard. I spent my entire life trying to earn your approval. I made myself smaller so Daniel could feel bigger. I stayed quiet when you called me ungrateful, lazy, disappointing. I told myself you didn't mean it, that maybe one day you'd see me. But you didn't. Not until someone else called me boss. And now you're here, pretending we had something we didn't. Her eyes glossed over, but she didn't interrupt. You say you were there when I had nothing. But you weren't. You were there when I needed to be criticized. When I failed to meet some invisible standard you held up for me, but not for Daniel. You loved who you wanted me to be, not who I was. She finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't care enough to ask. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was clean, absolute. She reached across the table, hand trembling slightly. I didn't take it. I'm done, Mom. Not because I hate you, but because I love myself more than I ever have before. And being around you hurts. So I'm choosing not to be around you anymore. A tear slid down her cheek. So that's it? After everything? Yes, I said gently. That's it. I stood up. She didn't stop me. Didn't beg. Didn't scream. Just watched me walk away. That evening, I sat down and drafted a formal message. One to be sent to every family member. Short. Direct. Please respect my decision to disconnect from the family. Do not contact me or Ava moving forward. This boundary is final. I didn't add explanations. I didn't defend my choice. I just sent it and turned off my phone. Ava came and sat beside me, her hand finding mine without needing to ask. You okay? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I will be. She kissed the side of my face and whispered, That's enough. And it was. For the first time in years, I felt no tension in my chest. No hope tangled with fear. Just a quiet, settled certainty. I had cut the cord, and I was still standing. It's been 3 months since I walked out of that cafe. The silence has been profound. No more messages. No surprise visits. No guilt-laced voicemails clawing for a response. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I discovered something I hadn't realized I was missing. Space to breathe without bracing for the next emotional landmine. I didn't know what peace really felt like until I stopped negotiating with people who only valued me when it served them. I'd spent years mistaking survival for harmony, thinking if I just kept the waters calm enough, maybe love would finally look like something I recognized. But peace isn't about keeping quiet. It's about knowing you don't owe anyone your suffering in exchange for a seat at their table. Now, I sit at my own. It's not crowded. It's not loud. But it's mine. And the people at it. Ava, a few friends who became family, my business partner from those early Ramanand stress nights. They don't need a reminder of what I'm worth. They never made me prove my value. They just treated me like I had it from the beginning. Sometimes I think back to that wedding, to the exact moment Omar called me boss. The stunned silence. The shift in the air. I don't revisit it for validation anymore. I revisit it because that was the moment I finally saw myself the way they never did. Not as the forgotten son, not as the outsider, but as someone who had carved his own path. Imperfect, hard one, but undeniable. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not carrying a grudge, but I am holding a boundary. Because here's the truth. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it just means letting go so thoroughly that the past can't reach you anymore. One afternoon, Ava and I hosted a small dinner on the back patio. Just a few people, nothing extravagant. The kind of gathering where laughter is easy and no one's measuring your worth in accolades or income. After we cleared the plates and opened another bottle of wine, someone asked if I ever missed them, my family. I thought about it for a second. Not just the people, but the longing. The aching hope that someday they'd change. No, I said, I don't miss them. I miss who I thought they could be. There was a quiet around the table. Not awkward, just understanding. Later that night, I sat out there alone. Same spot, same breeze, same view of the estate I once thought would buy me respect. But now, I saw it differently. It wasn't about the estate, or the title, or the shocked faces when the truth came out. It was about choosing not to sit where I wasn't wanted, and instead, building a seat, solid, whole, and entirely mine. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Every listen helps us bring more powerful, emotional stories to life. Join our growing community for daily stories that speak to the heart, explore family dynamics, and remind us all of the strength it takes to choose peace over pain. See you soon in the next story.